to speak about some of the insights that are coming out of the work that we're doing around innovation in low-carbon concrete. I'll talk about our view of the innovation landscape and some of the opportunity areas that we see. Talk about the work that we're doing with Innovate UK on demand-led innovation and advanced market commitments. And then thirdly, touch on some of the insights that are coming out of that work. So over the past 6 or 9 months, CLT, starting with a project mapping innovation areas for investment for the Clean Growth Fund, which is CLT's sister company, and also more recently in the work that we've been doing with Innovate UK on demand-led innovation, CLT's been researching and analysing the low-carbon cement and concrete innovation ecosystem in the UK. And what we see is a thriving landscape of innovations, and some that are very close to market ready, and some that also have the potential to really disrupt the sector, despite the challenges that are innate to this sector. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with these, but I'll highlight a few. Firstly, Portland cement is commoditised and cheap. A way to think about this is per tonne of CO2 emitted. So the cost of abatement in any form, which adds to the cost of the cheap concrete for a commodity product, that's a real problem. Limestone, which is the main ingredient of Portland cement, is globally abundant, and given the volumes that are required, it's a very hard substance to displace. Regulations and standards are often ingredients-based, which again locks in the use of Portland cement. And there's a very high capex that's needed for cement plants. And on top of that, the global stock of cement kilns is very young, so it's not fully amortized. But despite this, we're starting to see real signs of resilience and growth in the industry. So at a high level, you see on the right, for example, Sightline Climate's the growth in investment in Sightline Climate's data in the industry vertical, which includes low-carbon cement, amongst other materials. Also, we're starting to see significant funding into startups, in particular in the US, with Brimstone and Sublime Systems. So really quite exciting news coming from there. We'll get into the specifics of the UK in a moment, but what we see is a set of startups that are really starting to navigate those embedded challenges and barriers through some innovative technologies, a clever business model, which makes, we think, the landscape here incredibly compelling. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this, and Stafford mentioned some of this a moment ago, but for those of you that aren't, and to frame the way that we assess the sector, we'll just go back to basics for a moment. Concrete is made up of 4 main elements. We have a binder, or the cement, or the cementitious material, aggregates, which fill and add strength, water, and then chemical admixtures, so these enhance the properties of the concrete. The emissions, as Stafford mentioned, which are about 8% of global emissions, for Portland cement, the most common form of cement, half of those emissions approximately come from the fuel burn to heat the kiln, and the other half are chemical emissions from the breakdown of limestone into clinker, which has carbon dioxide as a byproduct. And so it's worth keeping this in mind when we're looking at the innovation ecosystem. Okay, so this might look a little bit confusing, but we'll break it down. This is our map of innovators in the UK. And we know that there are a lot more coming out of academia, but we've used some of these slightly more well-known names to illustrate our segmentation. So I'll just go through each of these. We've got alternative cement, so this is alternative binders. New production methods, so new ways of making cement and concrete. At the top, new building materials. These are whole materials replacement, completely replacing the use of concrete. Property enhancement, material efficient formula, so changing mixes to improve the properties of the concrete. Bottom, we have digital optimization technologies, so these are optimizing both the cement production, also through the supply chain, optimization technologies through the supply chain. And lastly, circular solutions. And we show these as intersecting because some of the innovations fall into multiple categories. And we really do use these to frame the way that we think about the opportunities in the sector. So if we start with the ones on the left, so alternative cements, novel production methods, and new building materials, these are the areas that we see as high risk, high reward. And I'll break that down a little bit more. So here we break down some of the sort of upsides and challenges in these areas. On the upside, these sorts of technologies can have huge impact and potential for major disruption. So here we're looking at real whole material replacements or complete changes in production methods, so really very disruptive. Another upside is that they can often target other adjacent markets. So, for example, BioXerox at the moment is targeting brick and marble sectors, while the cement sector is adapting. On the challenges side, these are the innovations that face the really high barriers. So challenging regulatory performance and safety standards. So when you're looking at replacing materials, clearly concrete is often used in structural applications. So those are really important. And secondly, high capex. We talked about high capex, but these really are the ones that have the highest capex barriers. However, despite these challenges, we are seeing in the UK that there are some solutions with some clever techs and innovative business models that are starting to address some of these really quite challenging barriers. So as I mentioned, solutions in this space have potential to disrupt the entire concrete or cement industry. So this is why we call them revolutionary. As I mentioned, the barriers are also higher, and they've got to be overcome through different innovative techs and business models. But an example could be for the standards, which are ingredients-based. A question might be, can an alternative binder overcome that regulatory barrier by creating a new cement that's chemically equivalent to Portland cement? And this is what Brimstone in the US have done. And in the UK, we're seeing that Cambridge Electric Cement and also Cocoon are doing something similar to address these barriers. So on the other side of the map, so this is technologies that enhance the properties of existing materials, digital optimized processes, material efficiencies. We see technologies that perhaps are slightly more evolutionary. So if we take a look at those, these tend to have lower barriers to entry. So they have lower capex typically, so a little bit faster to market. They have often the potential to integrate with more disruptive technologies or existing technologies, and they're compatible often with the existing regulatory landscape. On the downside, they may have lower impact and slightly less disruptive, but they're a really important part of the ecosystem. So the solutions here are likely to be important to incremental change in the short term in concrete and cement, which is going to be important given the timescales. And they're also important for slotting into a low carbon future. So they improve the efficiency of concrete and cement and production in various ways. So for example, carbon-re as a technology can hugely improve the efficiency of the current production processes. So while they may not revolutionize concrete and cement, they face fewer barriers to commercialization, and they might even integrate with and unlock further innovations. So an example of that unlocking might be the Mimicrete self-healing gel additive, which you can combine with a low-carbon blend, and that extends the lifetime of concrete. So if it's added to a blend, which might, for example, include the Ceratec low-carbon cementitious material, it can then be added to extend the lifetime of that. There's also the Converse software, which will optimize blends looking for the lowest carbon blend. So a lot of solutions that help to unlock the longer term solutions. So now I would like to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing with Innovate UK on demand-led innovation and advanced market commitments, really looking at ways to unlock those barriers to commercialization, in particular in those high risk, high reward categories. So there are a lot of innovations that could make a significant contribution to decarbonising cement and concrete, but these are not emerging at the speed and the scale consistent with the net zero challenge, and it's not clear which approaches are going to offer the best long-term options in terms of scalability and carbon reduction. So in response, Innovate UK is trialling a demand-led innovation approach to innovation to de-risk, secure investment capital and accelerate commercial deployment of low-carbon cement and concrete solutions in the form of an advanced market commitment. So what is an advanced market commitment? There are a lot of different definitions out there. This is the working definition that we are using. So an AMC is a binding commitment, so a contractual commitment, and that's a really important part of it, to make a market profitable, so that's larger or more certain, for an innovative product or service that's not yet on the market. And again, that's an important point. We're looking at innovations that are not yet at market, but which, when placed on the market, meet pre-agreed technical specifications. So in other words, we're incentivising R&D by promising to buy its fruits. So here's an example of an AMC. So this is quite a famous example of the pneumococcus vaccine, where the problem was that there was the investment in vaccines for diseases in the developing world wasn't taking place at the pace that was needed. So that was a problem that governments were trying to solve. And they thought, well, can we design a market signal that will incentivise investment in those vaccines? And it's exactly what governments did. So they said, if you, the vaccine producers, can develop a vaccine that meets this efficacy with this safety levels, we promise to buy it. And lo and behold, producers invested, developed the vaccines, and the pneumococcus vaccine was rolled out much, much faster than equivalent vaccines that didn't benefit from the advanced market commitment. And I really like this graph because it shows the gap here on the green arrow really clearly. Look at the difference in the rollout after 5 years. So just imagine if you could design an advanced market commitment that could do that for low carbon concrete, and what sort of impact that would have. So this is the Advanced Market Commitment Programme. I'm not going to go through all of it, but basically as part of this programme, we're bringing together buyers of concrete, so that's asset owners in infrastructure and the built environment and other sectors, specifiers, tier 1, tier 2 contractors, producers of concrete, innovators, investors, to understand and design a mechanism, a contractual mechanism to commit to buying concrete in the form of an AMC. We had in the initial months, we spent quite a bit of time talking to all those various different stakeholders to understand their challenges and to think about what we needed in the design to unlock that investment. In this particular case, we haven't got direct government buyers as we did in the vaccine case, but Innovate UK is funding an SBRI innovation competition. So there are some projects being funded to de-risk and support demonstration of some of the technologies that might be bought through the AMC. We're also working with the insurance sector, standards and so on to support development of the AMC. And at the moment, we're at the stage where we have an outline design, which I'll show you in a moment. We're just about to move into a commercial stage where we're actually going to design the contracts and figure out the details of exactly what is bought through that AMC, so the volumes, the exact products and so on, the carbon intensity. And I must say through this programme we've had the most tremendous engagement and support from right across the sector, from buyers, from innovators, from the concrete producers, cement producers and so on. It's really been quite impressive. So now I'll just touch on some of the things that investors told us in that early stage of engagement. So a lot of this will resonate with some of the things I said previously, but these I'll just pull out a few highlights. We heard a lot about the costs and prices of innovation. So this is all about the capital intensity of the solutions of getting them to market. And so that the AMC needs to be sufficiently large and over a long enough time scale to amortize that investment. We heard a lot about the fragmented supply chain. So this is all about sort of different supply chain for different products, different supply chain, for example, for precast versus ready-mix concrete. And again, that makes it very difficult for innovators to feel a demand pull through the supply chain. So the design needs to engage all of the supply chain and be at a scale to be able to engage all of the supply chain. It's CLT's experience that innovation can be quite cyclical. And again, this points towards the AMC needing to be over enough of a time scale that it can account for that. And lastly, we heard a lot about the complexity of navigating the standards, especially for the more disruptive solutions. And so it's important that the AMC is combined with support around the standards to make sure that when the AMC is in place, those innovations can actually come to market. So this is just highlighting what other stakeholders told us, and you'll see that it pretty much aligns with what investors said. We heard a lot about standards, a lot about the fragmentation of the supply chain, and a lot about the costs and the capital intensity. One of the things that came out that was a little bit different was that there needs to be a lot more transparency and information sharing across the whole supply chain, around innovations that are available, around the performance of those innovations, sharing data, not just on performance, but also on carbon intensity to just facilitate this whole process. So I'm putting the indicative design up here. I don't propose to go through this, but if anyone's interested to go through it separately, I'm happy to do that. I just wanted to illustrate the mechanism that is starting to emerge from the work that we're doing. And we've started to stress test this with both buyers and producers of concrete. Just to illustrate that because of the complexity of the sector, it is going to need to be a multi-contract, a sort of back-to-back contract sort of arrangement. It needs to include all of the supply chain. So we have the asset owners as part of the AMC. We have tier 1 and possibly tier 2 and tier 3 contractors as well. We'll have concrete producers, and those might be innovators, or they might be innovators within larger or working with the larger concrete and cement producers. So this is the sort of mechanism that we're looking at. There's a lot of detail that's going to need to be worked through over the coming months around specifically what is brought at each stage, what exactly the levels of commitment are at each stage, and what are the processes around standards and so on. But this is just an indication of what's emerging. And so to wrap up, we're always very keen to have more investor involvement. We already have quite a number of investors. I think we spoke to 8 or 9 investors in our first round of discussions to get those first insights. But any engagement ongoing from those that aren't yet involved would always be welcome, particularly as we start to develop the AMC to be able to stress test it, to work out will it work, will it incentivise investment, how big does it need to be, and so on. So we really need to be testing that because the whole purpose of this is to unlock investment into the sector. And secondly, we have a cohort of innovators, both those that are funded by the SBRI programme and also others that have engaged with the programme. And any support that investors can provide to those innovators, either through feedback or introductions, will always be really helpful. So thank you very much.